Welcome to the Bucknuts Happy Hour. This is the pre-holiday edition of the Bucknuts Happy Hour, if you're into that thing. I'm Patrick Murphy. We're going to talk a lot of different topics today on the Happy Hour. The recruiting and NIL has become a huge deal for Ohio State over the last several months, but it's escalated recently. So we're going to hit on that for a good chunk of this. And then we're going to dive into the football game, which is just 8 days away. Ohio State in the college football playoff, obviously, against Georgia. I'm sure you all know that by now. And we'll get to that and some things that I think in terms of that game, Buckeyes being an underdog, how they do that. But I want to touch on recruiting first and specifically the NIL conversation. And to do that, I'm bringing in Ari Wasserman from The Athletic. Ari, thanks for joining the Happy Hour. How you doing, man?
Hey, good. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, you're good. You're good.
Okay, good. I got this microphone in just for you, pal.
Oh, I appreciate that, man. It's been too long. Well, you were here briefly at the beginning of the season, I guess, but
yeah, they hired a beat writer now, so they don't need me anymore.
Well, we miss you for sure.
Appreciate it.
Look, I think that you have an interesting perspective on this NIL situation when it pertains to Ohio State, because you covered this program for quite a while. You're still pretty familiar with everything going on here, but you also cover recruiting nationally and are aware of kind of what's going on with NIL everywhere. So I wanted to bring you in to kind of give a big picture view, and then we can dive into the Ohio State perspective. But let me ask you this, and I brought this up to Berm while we were talking the other day, and he gave an interesting answer, but I think you may have a different one. From a non-Ohio State perspective, is NIL a bad thing for this sport the way it is currently being done? Because in my mind, if you're Oregon right now, you feel pretty good about NIL. But if you're Ohio State, maybe you're not as happy with how things are being run. What's your big picture perspective from that?
Yeah, the thing that I think is interesting is that, I lived in Columbus for a decade of my 35 years on this planet and covered that team for a long time. And when NIL was being discussed before it happened, because we used to, with other beat writers and stuff and the Woody, we would just shoot the shit and talk about it. Like everybody thought like, yeah, well, Ohio State's going to dominate. Think about how many Fortune 500 companies are here. Think about how much fan support there is. Think about the fact that it's a college town, but also a big city. Like all the things that, everybody listening to this podcast and you are aware, Ohio State has advantage wise. So like I am kind of surprised by like just the overall reaction to it in Ohio and how they feel like Ohio State's getting their butts kicked in it and people are down on it. Like what's going on? Like Ohio State is a place that has every advantage in the world and always has been, which is why it's been a top program for the past century and why it hasn't had any extended down periods, because it has all the advantages. So like for me, now that I live in Texas and I live near TCU and SMU and, go to all different programs in my new job, it's like, what am I supposed to feel bad for Ohio State because I can't figure it out? Like what is it that needs to happen? And I guess the mobilization of the paying system and the NIL and getting money up front for players, and whether or not that is good or bad for the sport or following rules. Like I'm completely aware of all the discourse around it. But like, figure it out. That's kind of like my deal. It's like, if you don't complain about it, this is Ohio State. Like, you've been better at everything for the last foreseeable past, like even non-foreseeable past. So like, what is the problem? Like, what are people upset about? I don't even get it.
Well, I mean, I think it's the fact that you have been at the top of the sport for so long, and now they are falling ever so slightly, but still somewhat
more
behind.
Money in Athens and Tuscaloosa and other places that are still managing to sign 5-star prospects in Columbus, Ohio. There's more money in College Station, Texas. Maybe there's a lot of oil money down there. I don't know, but like you're telling me that Ohio State doesn't have the resources, the boosters, and the financial fortitude to get this figured out.
Well, could it be as simple as some of these places were doing this more under the table already and now can step to the forefront, and Ohio State, which has a compliance department that's bigger than any in the country, was more careful about it? Is that a possibility?
I mean, I guess like there is a possibility that you are lagging behind on the pay for play stuff, right? Like everybody's
Yeah.
like, okay, well, the NIL spirit of it is to reward the current players. And, I saw CJ Stroud wearing a $65,000 Rolex at the Heisman ceremony. So, someone's getting paid something.
He bought his mom a house for Christmas.
Yeah. Like I'm sure that CJ Stroud's taken care of. And I guess that's the spirit of the rule. But the thing that everybody always knew was going to happen, Gene Smith knows it, Ryan Day knew it. The second you open up the financial door, the door wasn't going to get cracked. It was going to get burst through. And I think there's a very weird difference. There's a very weird line between what's permissible and what's not permissible, right? You're not supposed to be inducing players financially to come to your school, right? But to me, I think there's a very small difference between Ryan Day having a PowerPoint presentation in his office showing you how much CJ Stroud and other big time players at Ohio State makes, right, and another place saying, if you come here, we'll give you 25 grand off the bat. And I also wasn't born yesterday, and I don't think that I would sit here and act like Ohio State's not paying their players when they get there. I'm sure there's a baseline number that every player in their class is expected to get once they sign, because that's what you get as being a part of the NIL situation in this world. And I think it's all great. Now, are there crazy billionaire boosters who are just throwing 150 K at random players just to come there? I don't know. Clearly something's off, but like they still signed a top 5 class, so I'm not going to sit here and believe, and I don't know, if this is something that you believe, but like that Ohio State's doing nothing, because then how do they get anybody, because this isn't a charity, like people, this isn't the movie Rudy where they're going to go play at Ohio State because they love the Buckeyes more than any other school. If I were a 5-star prospect who lived on Lane Avenue and Ohio State offered me nothing and Michigan offered me $2 million, where am I going? Like it's simple dollars and cents and real life financial discussions. And, Ohio State's involved in some faction one way or the other. Now, are they as aggressive as others? Maybe not, but they better figure it out. And I don't care if it's against the rules, because how do you enforce what's inducement? You can induce anybody any possible way to come to your schools by saying anything. Like, how do you enforce that? And who's going to get suspended for taking money too early? It's America. Now the financial door is open, burst through it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, Ryan Day sort of sold it on signing day as, these guys are coming here for the right reasons. But then you had a kid in Jaden Bonsu who held out a day while trying to get a better, what we understand is trying to get a better NIL package. Yeah, right. Like, it is a free market.
Rivals.com wanted to quadruple your salary tomorrow. You might love Bucknuts, but it's America. What are you going to do? Right. Not take the money because you love working with the people at Bucknuts? Like, it's like, and it's not the to say that loyalty's dead and you can't love your program. I'm assuming, everybody loves Ohio State. When they go there, it would be one of the greatest places in the country to play. And I also know that the development aspect of it and the competing at a high level aspect of it are also parts of it. But I don't understand why, and maybe it's because it's been illegal for so long. Mm-hmm. People have criminalized it, but what's wrong with somebody trying to go get the most money? I try to get the most money in my life. Do you?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Everybody's in pursuit of money. That's the reason why people have jobs. So if a 17-year-old kid or 18-year-old kid who's getting an NIL deal wants to hold out on Ohio State more to eke out another $10,000 or $15,000, that's his prerogative. When I got offered a job at the Athletic, I countered. Am I a bad person because I wanted to provide for my family and make more money? So, like, this is the thing. It's like, we got to stop looking at these kids like they're terrible people because they're trying to max out what they have. These guys have earned it. And if somebody's willing to pay it and you think you can get more, then, your services go to the highest bidder.
Yeah, I think you make a good point, because it was for so long, we talked about this in such a negative way in terms of, schools that were doing it and whatnot. I know you covered Thad Matta in basketball when he was here, and he mentioned all the time about guys, that he wouldn't name that they lost because of other schools paying. And now it's still weird that it's out in the open, I think, for a lot of people.
Well, it's like, I've seen in the comments here, they do care it's against the rules and they are stricter about interpreting them. Okay, then lose.
Yeah,
the player that you lost out on that caused this entire discussion is going to be on the other sideline in the college football playoff. And if they care more about enforcing it than other schools, especially considering the fact that it's unenforceable, then sign more classes with bigger holes and less top tier talent, and watch Alabama sign 7 5-star prospects a year, and then do what Michigan did for the past 10, 15 years and talk about moral high ground while getting your ass kicked. So those are your two options.
Yeah, I agree. I think that is the concern of Buckeye fans, is that that's what's going to happen if things don't change. Speaking of change, do you think that it is sustainable that, boosters that, pick a school that have given out money are going to continue to pay? There's no return on investment here. You're not getting tickets to games. You're not getting your name on a building. Hopefully your team plays better, I guess. But is it sustainable for guys to continue to throw money at kids that haven't even stepped on a college campus yet? Do you see that lasting if the NCAA doesn't get involved?
So that's the interesting thing about it. Like, first of all, I think 80% of the numbers that we see, and 80% is a made up number, but all the numbers that we've seen on Twitter about how much money people are getting it's 80%. Are you allowed to curse on this thing? 80% of it's bullshit. Like, dude, you're good. Come on. Drake May got offered $5 million and he stayed at North Carolina because Mac Brown hired an offensive coordinator that's good with footwork. Do people think that people are dumb? Like, are we supposed to be stupid?
Yeah.
If I were Drake May, I would walk on a highway to Duke for $5 million. He stayed there because he loves UNC because his dad played there. Come on, $5 million. So what was the question? I don't even remember what the question is. Like,
is it sustainable?
Is it sustainable? Yeah, that's right. I don't know the answer to that. The reason why I went on that little mini rant is because I think that a lot of the dollar figures that we're hearing are probably inflated because it behooves the agents and it behooves the people involved to try to make as much money as possible by inflating how much these guys are worth. But I could see, like with anything else, if you wanted to buy a Rolex 5 years ago, you could go in the store and buy one. And if you want to buy one now, you've got to pay more because you can't get one at retail. Like, everything is a false market. And now that market's coming down because less people want them. And the market sets themselves, and, if people are buying, players for $2 million or $3 million or $8 million or whatever the numbers are, and those players turn out to not work out well or whatever, these rich people who are kind of assigned to be the brokers of these deals are probably going to think twice about it next time. You don't get rich and have that kind of money by making stupid financial decisions over and over again. I think that NIL will stabilize. And I think we'll probably eventually get to a point where this is more above board and we have more, contractual things that are available to us to actually analyze.
Right.
But I don't know. It's 2 years into it now. So, of course, people are going to go off the rails and try their best to do everything they can to make their teams perform better. But if their money spent doesn't equate to more wins, then it's certainly going to calm down, because who wants to spend money on something that doesn't have results? The number one thing that I find most amusing about this too, and I did it myself on this show, is like, why are the rich people who root for teams the ones responsible for it now? It's like, oh yeah, Ohio State, they're not paying enough money to get Damon Wilson. It's like, well, who's the rich guy in Columbus who's going to write the check for this one? If I was a millionaire and I lived in Ohio and I was a big Ohio State fan, I wouldn't be like, I'm not paying for this. So like, that's also like the number one question too. It's like, are there boosters at Georgia and Alabama or in the South who care more about football than they do in the North, that are more willing to put their own money on the line in order to accomplish these things? And I think that's all, very well, reasoned in debate topics, but I just don't know for sure, what's the reason why Ohio State's not doing it as well as everybody else? It's because they don't want to break the rules and they want to do it the right way. Is that what we're telling ourselves?
Yeah. And the collectives haven't been well established, I guess, is the thought process.
Yeah. So I think that if that's the case, then as NIL becomes more regular and, things start to, become normalized, that Ohio State will catch up. And I think other programs will catch up too. Like maybe the Texas A&Ms and the Tennessees of the world, deserve some credit for getting off to a fast start and being ready to hit the ground running when this stuff comes. But when we're in year 9 of the NIL world and everybody's paying and everybody's doing these things, I'm assuming that Ohio State's got the money, the resources, and the administration to try to figure this out and make sure that they don't get left behind.
Yeah, it seems to me that Ohio State expected this to be the, CJ Stroud gets paid by various companies because he's Ohio State's quarterback and not the collectives. And other schools were more ready with collectives, from the jump.
And I do think that being the Ohio State quarterback is, a very valuable position. I mean, CJ Stroud have proven that. So, the thing that's hard about football is nothing's guaranteed. You got 5-star quarterbacks who are on the roster right now who might not ever play. Like, Kyle McCord was a 5-star player, and I don't know if he's in the plans right now, right? Or he has to win a battle to play, and then what? Then he's going to go transfer somewhere else if he doesn't. Sometimes that money, if it's $2 million, if it actually is $2 million, which I doubt it is, but if it were, you'd almost be stupid not to just take that money and hope for the best, because that's life-altering amounts of money. You could buy a $500,000 house and live out the next 25 years comfortably just with the cash you get from that one deal.
Right.
And everybody wants to be developed for the NFL, and everybody wants to, be in a position where they're, playing for championships and get to have the nice facilities that Ohio State offers and all that stuff. That's all well and good, but go look at the 5 best quarterbacks in the NFL right now. Where'd they go to college? Like Cal, Texas Tech. It's just kind of random anyway. So,
Right.
It's all about personal finances, I guess, and decisions that you want to make. But, I try to be as reasonable and logical about this as possible. And, there's a lot of football programs out there that I could feel bad for. And I don't think Ohio State's very high on that list.
Yeah. Well, as you mentioned, still top 5, top 6 class, depending on how you look at it.
Mm-hmm.
What do you make of this class? I know you don't cover Ohio State recruiting as closely as you used to, but I assume you're pretty aware of some of these.
To it. Yeah, I still am. Yeah, I mean, I think it's a very good class. It's not an Ohio State class. They've got some holes there. Did they sign a running back? They didn't, right?
No.
Caleb Downs would have been a nice get to have in the secondary.
Yeah.
I think that, what do they have? 7 top 100 players, and 3 of them are receivers. It's like, okay,
right.
So they signed 4 non-receiver top 100 players, and Alabama signed 15. Okay, what do you think is going to happen when they play on the field in 2 years? Yeah. That's the real issue here. What do you think is going to happen when they play Georgia in 2 weeks? When they have all these players, and Ohio State's done really well, but it's not quite at the same level. Like, I think that Ohio State doesn't pat itself on the back unless it signs 10 to 15 top 100 players in a class. And they finished with 1 5-star prospect, went over on every 50-50 prospect they had on signing day, and are generally signing a very good class if you're Miami or Penn State or Texas or USC. But Ohio State's supposed to be playing ball with Alabama and Georgia, and this class, in my opinion, doesn't really stack up to it. I know it's got the 3rd highest average player rating. The floor of the class is probably higher than past ones have been. I think that they've got some steals, like Calvin Simpson-Hunt's going to be a stud. Like, there's good elements to it, but to me, winning a national championship in 2022 or in 2023 is about the wealth of players that you get.
Sure.
And the sheer amount depth. And like, if Alabama's going to sign 15 top 100 players a year for a 4-year period, what's the math on that? That's 60 of the top 80 players on their roster are top 100 players. Like, anybody confused why they're really good every year? And that's the area that I thought Ohio State was going to be when they won the national title in 2014 and returned their whole team in 2015. But what we've gotten is 4 years of missing the playoffs, now 2 consecutive losses to Michigan, and the worst class on paper that they've signed in the last 4 years, since Urban left anyway.
Right. One last thing before I let you go.
Am I being a downer? Do you want to ask me like a good one, like a nice question? Like, I'm not trying to be an asshole. Like, I'm just trying to be realistic.
Look, I think that's part of the reason I wanted to talk to you, because I do think you don't sugarcoat it, right? You're not here to talk up Ohio State when there's not something to talk up. So,
I do think that the program should be a top 3 program in the country. Like, that's the thing that's so, like, I lived in your community. I covered the team every day. A lot of the assistants on at least the old staff I got to know pretty well, and I do think that, it's good people in Columbus, and they will love their team. And I think that's what makes this job so fun. But unfortunately, just right now, it doesn't seem to be headed in the right direction. And it's Ryan Day's job to try to figure out how to get that thing back on track, because, what's happening on the field is a little bit of a step back. And, I guess he can make everything better in 2 weeks if he, pulls off a miracle. But now the recruiting is slipping back a little bit. We've got NIL discussions like we're having here. It's like, this isn't what's supposed to be the vibe around the Ohio State football program.
Last thing, this may be a downer too, but are you surprised that they've been more careful than a lot of programs with the transfer portal? I mean, Ryan Day talks about the culture and wanting the right guys, and I get all that, but you also need, as you've pointed out, you need the talent, and you can fill holes pretty quickly. And they have, you've gotten some guys, obviously Justin Fields being
somebody in the live comments saying that Alabama wasn't very good this year, as if like that's like a point to make when talking about how many players that they signed. Like, they don't win the national championship every year. Like, what are we talking about? Like, yeah, they had a bad year for the first time in 10.
Yeah. Well, they missed the playoffs.
You think the stars don't matter because Alabama lost 2 games? I don't understand how people it blows my mind. I'm sorry.
No, you're good.
Yeah, it's like, Alabama, the stars don't matter. Look at Alabama. They suck. All right. Good point. You're right.
Transfer portal.
Transfer portal. Yeah,
Are you surprised that Ohio State hasn't used it more? I guess is the basic
no,
question.
I'm not surprised. I mean, usually the teams that recruit the best need it the least, right?
Yeah.
So, there are certain areas that they're going to need help with. Like next year, Ohio State's has a chance to lose JT Tuimoloau and Jack Sawyer after next year. They didn't really sign a 5-star defensive end in this class.
Yeah.
You're probably going to want to get an elite pass rusher. I'm sure they could use some help at safety. They might need a running back. Might need a running back to spell it depending on how things go. You don't you just go in and take players just to take them, but it's a good thing for depth. If I were a head coach and I felt like my program was headed in the right direction, my thought process would always be to build it through the high school ranks to develop my talent and to fill gaps in when necessary. Like Ohio State's got one of the best transfers of all time. Going to get Justin Fields is incredible and maybe want to be the best player in college football. In Ohio State football history, or the best quarterback even. The opportunities there will present themselves. But, I did see that Georgia just signed 2 of the top, receivers in the portal. Alabama does a very good job with Jameson Williams, filling in gaps when they need it to. I think that for the elite level players, it makes sense, but I would certainly not be surprised to see them go get like 10 or 11.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'm going to just real quick. Benjamin asked, what's the score on December 31st? I assume he means Ohio State, Georgia.
Yeah. What's your score? I'm curious.
I haven't done one yet. I'm definitely picking Georgia. I think it will be closer than people imagine, but I do think Georgia will win because, as you've pointed out, they're the number 1 team in the country all year for a reason.
Yeah. Well, the problem with picking Ohio State games is, and I rarely pick against Ohio State because, as you know, I'm a talent person, and Ohio State's roster is built in a way where if they were to put it together, they can beat anybody in the country. Like if Ohio State won a national championship, in my opinion, this year, that would be less shocking than if Michigan or TCU did, just based on the roster makeup,
Yeah.
But I don't know if I've seen enough from Ryan Day and his coaching staff where I could, in good faith, put trust in them to figure out how to beat that team. So I think it's bad for Georgia because they got the hardest matchup in the first round, I think. And usually the number 1 seed in sports isn't supposed to be rewarded with that tough matchup.
Yeah.
But like between coaching and talent across the board, like doesn't Georgia have a advantage at every identifiable area? So, I don't think that Ohio State's going to lose 38-0 or anything, but I think that Georgia's going to probably cover the spread. I would say something like 38-27 or something like that, maybe.
All right.
Georgia.
Yeah.
I just I don't know what needs to, what light needs to turn on. But when I was watching the Michigan game, and I was pretty shocked for the second consecutive year, by the way, because teams with that much talent advantage shouldn't be made to look the way that Ohio State's looked like. It just got me thinking, all year Ohio State's players have, I don't know if you agree with this, Pat. You tell me, because you've been to all the games. But when watching it on TV, it looks like they lack enthusiasm. Like they don't seem to be having fun. That CJ Stroud hangs his head a lot. Like there just seems to be something missing, and I don't know if that's something that can be fixed in 3 weeks. Like, is that a fair assessment, or do you think I'm overthinking it a little bit?
I think somewhere in the middle. I think that they know come this year like how important it was to be perfect because of last season. And look, I said all year, CJ Stroud could do all he could have won the Heisman last year and this year, but if he didn't beat Michigan, win the Big Ten, and make the college football playoff, people are going to look at him different, and they have. I mean, you've seen the reaction the last few weeks about him. So I feel like that was on all of their shoulders all year, and then you try and be perfect, and perfect doesn't exist, right? And so I do think using CJ as the example, yeah, I noticed that too, that he doesn't look like he's having fun, but I think he also feels the weight of all of this because there's that pressure, and a lot of quarterbacks
I'm not trying to
recently
put it all on CJ.
I know.
I think that the team itself just like looks like they played a lot of close games they probably should have been playing in this year. They look like it's just unenthusiasm. Somebody just said that enthusiasm is missing for 2 years, unmotivated. There's just a look about them that just doesn't make it seem like they're running on all cylinders. In order to beat Georgia, they're going to have to come in with an incredible game plan. They're going to have to get great performances out of all of their best players. And people are going to have to believe and want to be there and, do all the things. Like it has to be. You think that 2014 was a miracle? People like to look back and think like, oh my God, they won a national championship with their third string quarterback. If you go back and look at 14, they beat Alabama on the way, but that was maybe the worst or second worst Alabama team of the Saban era. At least the ones that made the playoff. Not that it wasn't a very good team, but it wasn't what they saw in the championship 2 years ago. Yeah. And then they beat Oregon, who they out-talented at every position on the field. If Ohio State, after what we saw this year, were to go out and beat Georgia in Atlanta and then turn around and beat whoever they play in the national championship game to win a national championship, I would probably hold that run in an even higher regard than 14, which is crazy because I don't know how Ohio State fans would react to winning a national championship in a year where maybe they don't beat Michigan.
Yeah, don't win the Big Ten.
But like maybe if they beat Michigan in the championship, then it's the greatest season of all time. So like there's still a potential out there for this to end happy for Ohio State. I just don't know if Ryan Day and his staff have earned the benefit of the doubt to be picked. It's one of those games where you just pick Georgia because that's the prudent thing to do, the right thing to do. And if Ohio State happens to win this football game, then you can write in a column about how amazing it was that Ryan Day got this whole thing turned around in 3 weeks. I just don't see it happening.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing you hear about Urban, and you talk to players that played under him and whatnot, is ultimate motivator, right? And I don't know if Ryan is that same way. Now, that doesn't mean Ryan has other qualities that aren't very good too, but people have thrown out, and I'm going to talk about after you're off, this underdog thing and how they've been so good as an underdog. Well, most of that was under Urban. I mean, I think could be a different. We're talking about different animals here. When you talk about the way Urban handles,
aren't they like 8-2 against the spread in games where they're underdogs or something like that?
Yeah, something along those lines. But
yeah, well, usually when they're underdogs, they're playing teams like this because it takes quite a bit for Ohio State to be an underdog. I mean, there were a few years where they were underdogs against Michigan, right?
Yeah, probably
on the road, but like, I don't know. The trend stuff in gambling is always interesting to take a look at, but like, I don't know if you watched Ohio State play this year and I don't know how much what they did in 2016 as an underdog matters right now.
Yeah, exactly.
I think that like, this team is in a very critical intersection program wise and seeing how they respond to what happened on the field in Ohio Stadium and the negativity around the program, the sputtering finish in the recruiting class and all this stuff. I do think that it's going to be kind of an uphill climb, but I'll tell you one thing, man, if Ryan Day's tired of people being negative about him or saying things that aren't nice or, win that football game and go, it's gone,
right.
So, they've got an opportunity to do it. And I can't wait I'm covering the Fiesta Bowl. So I'm a little bit annoyed by it because I'll be writing and working off of that game while the Ohio State game's on, but I'll try my best to watch as much of it as I can.
Well, your boy, Bill Landis went and
my guy
is going to have a kid. So he doesn't even get to come down to to Atlanta with us. So
I know
he's pretty bummed about that.
He's having his first child and he can't go to Atlanta and party with the boys, but congrats to Bill. And it's one of my best friends. And, I'm happy that, this is a blessing for him and what's happening to him. And, I'm excited to read and see how things go. And, there are days where it's easy to miss Columbus. So, I hope everybody that's there, has a happy holiday and enjoys the game.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, Ari. I do appreciate it. And it was good having you on.
I got a little spicy there in the middle there and I kind of feel bad.
That's good.
I was kind of an asshole to that person that was talking about Alabama, and I'm sorry about that. I just sometimes I get triggered by arguments that just have no water at all, and they like try to use it as a way to prove that you're wrong when it's just like the example didn't even make sense, and if you want to have a discussion about whether stars matter or a team that has a lot of talent on their roster doesn't always compete at the highest level. That's one thing. Upsets happen. Teams have bad years, but what talent does do is give you an opportunity to be exceptional. And without that talent, you can't be. And, Ohio State's been the beneficiary of a talent advantage. And 85 or 90 probably percent of their games since the beginning of the Urban Meyer era. And in this game coming up, they will not have the advantage. So it'll be very curious to see how if the Michigan game happened with a distinct talent advantage, then what's going to happen when they're on the wrong side of that equation. They end up winning this football game. It'll be a fun thing to talk about in terms of how we view Ryan Day and all that stuff.
For sure. Absolutely. Well, thanks again. I do appreciate it. I know you got a lot going on, your own kid and all your work and whatnot, but I appreciate your time. I think you give a different perspective than a lot of people, and I enjoy that. So
yeah, thanks man. I appreciate you for having me on, and good luck and enjoy Atlanta down there.
Yeah, we'll have a good time. I'll talk to you soon.
Yep. All right, bro.
See ya. That was Ari Wasserman from The Athletic. He joined us to talk about kind of the recruiting side of things, the NIL situation, all that jazz. If you missed any of that, you can go back and listen on the podcast version of this. We did dive into some of what I want to talk about now, which is Ohio State, Georgia, because Ohio State is certainly the underdog in this game. No doubt about that. Buckeyes are, I don't know what the line is at this point, but Georgia's clearly the favorite. And so that was brought up when we met with the football players. We talked to 20 of them or so. That came up a lot, this underdog idea. And, guys had different responses. Some guys said, we always view each other or view ourselves as the underdog in games. It's Ohio against the world, all that. And, that's all well and good to say that. But, how do you, as an Ohio State program, where you are almost always the favorite? Jim Graham here says the line's at 7.5 now. Thanks for that. You're always the top dog in almost every game you play. And this year, I think Ohio State was the favorite in every game. I know Notre Dame and Michigan would have been the only two in question. So how do you switch that? You want to go into every game with the mentality of we need to bring our best and da-da-da-da and all that. And, I think Ohio State did that for the most part. But how do you then turn around and be the underdog as this team that was a preseason favorite, one of the preseason favorites to win the national title? You have guys that have won national awards. You have a unanimous All-American in Marvin Harrison Jr., consensus All-American in Paris Johnson. How do you take that and then just become the underdog? And I think that's going to be interesting. And, I saw, and Ari brought this up too. Jay said, I say it's 8-2 as an underdog. And as I said to Ari, a lot of that came under Urban Meyer. And say what you will about Urban Meyer. There were, I think people reflect back on Urban now because there's issues with Ryan Day and think that there's also, Urban everything went perfectly under Urban. That obviously wasn't true. But what Urban did do is win games that no one thought the Buckeyes would do. And that's what that 8-2 record shows mostly. Now how do you do that if you're Ryan Day? Because as Ari was pointing out, there are issues with this team. And we saw it kind of the second half of this year. And I've been very clear, I don't want to sound super negative. I've been clear that, look, this is the number 2 team in the country for the vast majority of the year. You have plenty of talent. You were talked about as the only team with your offense that could go out and compete with Georgia. And I think there's something real there. But if you want to play this underdog card, how do you shift that focus from just being the week-to-week favorite? And even against Michigan, even against Notre Dame, everyone expected Ohio State to win. Now everyone's talking about Georgia. And they're going to hear it. And, I think it's on the coaching staff to figure out how to turn that into motivation. And, I don't know how well this staff does that. And I'm not saying they can't. I'm saying I honestly don't know. Look, the number of times that Ryan Day as the head coach has been an underdog have been very few. Obviously Alabama in the national championship game, maybe Clemson, both times they played. I'm not sure. Obviously both those games, the first one was very close. The officiating and whatnot. The second one, obviously, Ohio State wins. But there are just not a lot of examples of Ryan Day. And you have to have that beyond Ryan Day. It has to be throughout the coaching staff of getting these players to buy in to that underdog role, because that's not something they're used to. I mean, even before these kids got to Ohio State's campus, a lot of them were playing on teams that made runs in state tournaments, won state titles. These kids have always been the best. And so I think it's going to be really interesting to see how you embrace that underdog role and how you flip that switch. Because I don't think it's as easy as just like, oh, ESPN picked us to lose. No, I mean, like, people talk about Ohio State all the time, and we hear from the players and coaches, we don't buy into that. We don't hear that stuff. Well, you need to hear it now. And if I'm Ryan Day, if I'm Jim Knowles, if I'm pick the coach all the way down, I'm putting that up in our position rooms. I'm putting that up, letting them know that, look, this is what people are saying about you. People are picking Georgia to cover the spread, whatever it may be. Anything that you can grab from the Bulldogs, anything they say as potential bulletin board material. And I think Georgia players are smart enough to not say a ton, but you need to find a way to relight that fire and then do it again to make them know that they are the underdogs and embrace that. And that was what happened in 2014, where Urban, he did it. I mean, first Urban did it. He's done it most of his career. And again, this is the best thing he's done. He's the ultimate motivator. He was a psych major, I believe, at Cincinnati. He was able to make Bowling Green better than they were supposed to be with the talent. Utah, same thing. Gets to Florida, upsets Ohio State in the national championship game. And there were obviously other things that were talked about. So how do you then get that kind of 2014 motivation? Forget the magic and whatnot. Obviously, there was a lot of that, but like, how do you get them? I saw somebody put on Twitter the other day this clip of JT Barrett in the locker. It was from an Ohio State thing. JT Barrett just yelling at the team and getting them psyched up and things like that. Are there those guys in the locker room that are going to do that before the game and each day in practice? We heard. I wrote about it. I know a lot of people wrote about it. We heard JT Tuimoloau stepped up before the first practice after Ohio State lost to Michigan and had to tell the team, look, we still may have a shot here. Let's not waste these days in practice. That's your sophomore defensive end who's a pretty quiet guy. Is there somebody else on this roster, somebody's else, multiple people that are going to stand up in the locker room and get this team fired up and believe that they can, shock the world, Ohio against the world, all these slogans that Ohio State has? It's easier to say we're the underdog. We know that we're going to buy into this underdog mentality than to actually go out there and do it. You've seen it before, and I don't know. I'm going to be very interested to see how Ohio State handles that role, because it could be the difference. If they really are able to buy into it, I think there's enough talent on this team to upset Georgia. But if you go in with the same mentality they've had really the second half of the year, saying you're the underdog, those type of things, I don't know. Georgia has the experience at this. Georgia has the talent, maybe more so than Ohio State. So, I think that's going to be very interesting to follow. And I think once we get down to Atlanta, when we talk to players, I think you can get a bit of a sense of that. I was not in I was on the beat, but I did not go to the playoff games in 2014. But I've talked to people who were there. I watched those interviews, and maybe it's looking back. I don't know. I try and remember that point in time. There was something different about the way that those guys talked about that game and answered questions and things like that. And so I hope we get a similar sense when we get down to Atlanta and get ready for this game with interviews and whatnot. But I think that's going to be the biggest thing. And, obviously, Ohio State has to do some things better. Ryan Day has to be more aggressive. And I think that plays into Jim Knowles has to be maybe less aggressive. But I think all of that plays into accepting the underdog. I think Ryan Day in this last Michigan game was too tight because he knew, I can't lose to Michigan. I can't do it again for a second year in a row. That's why you're only up, whatever it was at halftime, 20 to whatever, as opposed to being, scoring touchdowns and kind of letting the play calling flow and things like that. And then the second half, it was the same stuff. The adjustments weren't there. It was so tight. And I think, Ryan Day has to embrace this underdog role. And look, we're going to let it go. And, we're going to throw the ball around with CJ and these receivers, and we're going to play tight defense on these wideouts and, cover the tight end and try and get to Stetson Bennett. You've just got to play free and accept that role as the underdog and not worry if you're the Ohio State coaching staff or the Ohio State players. Oh God, if we lose this game to Georgia, we've already got all this negative talk about losing to Michigan and recruiting and things like that. Like, if we lose to Georgia, what's it going to be like all offseason? Let the fans worry about that. Deal with that after the game. Be the underdog that makes the upset. Play free, play loose. And, this is the first real chance Ryan Day has to do that. Maybe the national championship game against Alabama was another opportunity, but I throw that one out just because of how depleted Ohio State was COVID-wise. And, I think that Alabama team might be the most talented of all time. I think there's a debate there. This Georgia team is really good, but they're definitely not in that sphere, I don't believe. So, we'll see about that. I'm going to wrap it up here. Holidays are coming, and if you're in Columbus, you know what the weather's like, and I've got to drive 2 hours to get somewhere this evening. So going to get ready for that, but wanted to give you guys kind of a breakdown on the schedule for what to expect while we're down in Atlanta. I will be flying down on Christmas night. I will get to Atlanta Christmas night, and the first media availability will be on the 26th, which is actually on Zoom, so I didn't need to, but I booked my flight before I knew that. So the first media availability, and bear with me here, I'm pulling this up. The first media availability is on the 26th, and it is, I believe, with the coaches. Sorry, I should have had this pulled up. Here it is. All right. I thought this was it. Hold on. I know this is really bad podcasting. Where did the schedule go? Anyway, I'll try and pull it up here as I talk. But the first day, I think we get the coaches again on Zoom. So we'll have plenty of stuff from that. But we'll get offense one day, defense. The offense, I think it's Ohio State defense and Georgia offense on the 27th. Then we get the flip of that on the 26th, or the 28th, I'm sorry. And I'm all over the place right now as I try and find this media availability. Anyway, we'll get both sides of the ball back and forth those 2 days. And then the final day, which I believe is the 29th, 30th, we'll get the head coaches again. And there's a media day in there. Yeah, the media day is 29th, 30th. We get the coaches day before the game, and then obviously the game. So, look, we're going to have plenty of content. Steve Hellwag and Dave Bill are going to join me down there. I think they both get in the 26th, maybe the morning of the 27th. So we're going to have them down there. We're going to have tons of stuff. Be ready for that. Dave will still be doing the BM5 from down there. I'm sure he'll have Steve and I on at some point. My plan for this podcast is to do a Bucknuts Happy Hour with Steve and Dave while we're down there. I'm going to have to work out the logistics of that, whether it'd be better to have them sitting here with our drink in our hands, or if we do it on through this and do it from our various locations in the hotel. But we've also talked, and we'll see if this works out timing wise, if you're going to be in Atlanta, maybe doing some sort of meetup one of the nights. As much as 5 days sounds like it's a long time to be down there, there's a lot going on. So we may do some sort of meetup thing. If you're on the Bucknuts message boards, we'll post it on there if we end up getting that together. But I hope everyone has a happy holiday. Get through this. Try and enjoy this. Don't worry about the game too much throughout the holidays. If you celebrate these holidays, then we're off. And next week is going to be a crazy one. Look, I enjoy these bowl games a lot, especially when it's the college football playoff. People care. We're not only do we get to have a good time down in Atlanta, and trust me, if you think drinking a beer on the Bucknuts Happy Hour is a good time, we'll have a good time in Atlanta. But we also work hard, play hard, so to speak, and we'll have plenty of stuff. There's going to be a lot of work. So stay tuned for updates on when we're going to do the next Bucknuts Happy Hour, but we'll definitely have one down from Atlanta closer to the game when we'll really dive into it. Again, if you missed anything from earlier, we had Ari Wasserman from The Athletic. Ari used to cover Ohio State, provides a very unique perspective, I think, because of what he does now, national recruiting, and then the fact that he knows this program as well as he does. So we talked some NIL, we talked some recruiting stuff with him. Ari got a little fired up, and then he apologized for it. Then, we talked about the Buckeyes and how they handle being an underdog. So if you missed anything from this, the podcast will be up. This will also be posted on YouTube, Facebook, whatever you watched it on, it'll archive. Thank you guys for tuning in. I appreciate it. Like, subscribe, all that good stuff. It does us wonders. You wouldn't even believe it. And I don't think I ever said I'm drinking a Christmas ale, Great Lakes Christmas ale. I still have a ton of them in my refrigerator. Plus, we're almost to Christmas, so I figured it made sense. Anyway, we'll talk next week before the Buckeyes take on Georgia. We'll have a great show live from Atlanta. And until then, cheers, Buckeye fans.